What's up guys, Lifting here. About a week ago, the 1.3.0 skill tree or preliminary skill tree was released for us to take a look at. And based on the feedback that GGG has received and their own plans, they have now released a newer version of this skill tree, version 2. And in this skill tree we are seeing some pretty cool changes. We're seeing some buffs, we're seeing a few nerfs to certain skill nodes and notables. And in this video we're going to go over these changes. Now the changes we're going to talk about in this video are based on what I've been able to locate and observe myself, but I also need to give a huge shout out to Onitel from the Reddit Path of Exile community. This guy has compiled a long list of the changes and I'm going to link to the thread below in the description if you guys just want to check out the thread. So thank you very much for that, Onitel. Alright guys, so let's get into it and let me quickly show you what we are dealing with here. This is the old version 1.3 version 1 skill tree. And this is the 1.3 new version, version 2. And what we're going to do is that we're going to compare these skill trees side by side. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the changes. We're going to talk a little about them, but the intention of the video is to simply showcase the differences. So first of all, take a look at these armor, evasion and life nodes. 6 increased evasion rating and armor along with 3% increased maximum life. And that goes for all of these 3. If you compare this to the new skill tree, you will see that instead of 3% increased maximum life, we now have 4% increased maximum life in all of these. So a total of 3% extra life if you're picking up all of these skill nodes. Additionally, we're seeing that mana flows has received a buff, a small buff, but still a buff. Instead of providing 10 plus to intelligence, it now provides 20 plus to intelligence. Alright, so next we're seeing that the Duelist projectile attacks have been buffed a little as well. If we compare these 8% increased projectile damage to the new ones that we have over here, we'll see that these are 8, but these are now 10. So a 2% increased projectile damage for these skill nodes. Nothing is changed for these though. The same goes for the Dervish cluster. Over here we'll see that we have 10% increased physical damage while dual wielding for these 2 skill nodes. If we compare this to the new Dervish cluster over here, these will have 12 now. So overall a damage buff here as well. And the same goes for the accuracy rating skill node here that provides 16% increased accuracy rating while dual wielding. The new skill tree now provides 18% increased accuracy. Dervish in itself has not received any changes and is still nerfed compared to the 1.2 skill tree. For more duelist damage, we're also seeing that the melee nodes here near the Defiance cluster, the shield cluster here, have been buffed. These provide 10, 10 and 10 increased melee damage when holding a shield. If we compare these to these, they now have 12% increased melee physical damage while holding a shield. Now if we move a little to the side here, let's do this on the skill tree as well, we'll see that the Executioner notable has received a pretty sweet buff. At the old skill tree it provided 24% increased physical damage with two-handed melee weapons and 16% increased accuracy rating with two-handed melee weapons. The new notable provides 25% increased physical damage with two-handed melee weapons, 5% increased attack speed, and 20% increased accuracy rating with two-handed melee weapons. And this is, in my opinion, a really nice change. I've been trying to make a few two-handed builds, and they have all seemed a little lackluster compared to the 1.2 skill tree, so I'm happy to see a buff, especially to Destroyer here. Also, you guys might have noticed that it has been renamed. It is no longer named Executioner. It is now called Destroyer. Executioner is down here in the bottom of the skill tree. But that's not all. The skill nodes around Destroyer has received a 2% increased damage buff as well. They now provide 12, 12, 12, and before they provided 10, 10, 10. So very nice. And now if we scroll down a little here to the Revelry cluster, we'll see that this cluster before had 5 plus 2 mana gained on kill for these 2 skill nodes and 2 mana gained on each hit by attacks and 10 mana gained on kill. This cluster has received a pretty sweet buff. It now provides 4% increased maximum mana for these 2 skill nodes and 8% increased maximum mana from the Revelry notable. So a total of 16% increased mana when you pick up these skill nodes. Very nice. I definitely feel like that is going to make the skill cluster much more appealing. And now that we are down here, we're seeing that the armor and evasion skill nodes here have been buffed by 4% for each skill node. Before they provided 8% increased evasion rating and armor, now they provide 12% increased evasion and armor. The notable cloth and chain along with the elemental resistance nodes remain unchanged. Oh, and also before I forget it, let's take a look at bravery. Bravery before provided 20% increased evasion rating and armor and 10% increased maximum life. It now provides 24% increased evasion rating and armor, but only 8% increased maximum life. So basically what GGG want here is to provide you with more damage mitigation, and you're going to make up for the lesser amount of life by picking up these now buffed skill nodes up here. And now if we move down towards the bottom of the Duelist tree again and take a look at aim by dexterity and the skill nodes leading up to this. Before the change, these two skill nodes had 8% increased physical damage when dual wielding and 3% increased attack speed while dual wielding. If we compare these to the new skill tree, they only have 6% increased physical weapon damage while dual wielding, but the 3% increased attack speed remain the same. However, ambidexterity that before provided 20% increased main hand damage and 20% increased offhand attack speed now has 26% increased attack damage in main hand and 20% increased attack speed in offhand. So the change is that they have basically removed the damage from these two skill nodes here and added it to the notable. Another interesting change is that Testudo that before provided 3 additional chains to block with shields and increased block recovery now has the 8% mana gained when you block. Pretty weird, pretty interesting. I don't know, we'll have to see the new skill gems before we can see if this actually matters. We're also seeing a buff to the Wrecking Ball skill nodes and the notable itself. These skill nodes before provided 3% increased attack speed, as you can see. They now provide 4% increased attack speed, and the notable provided 15% increased physical damage and 10% increased attack speed with two-handed melee weapons. With the new notable, we're seeing 20% increased physical damage with two-handed melee weapons and 10% increased attack speed with two-handed melee weapons. So overall, very nice. As I said, two-handed melee weapons could definitely use a buff in my opinion. Besides that, we're also seeing that the rendering strikes notable, the axe notable here, before had 28% increased physical damage and 4% increased attack speed. It has now been changed, so it now have 26% increased physical damage with axes and 6% increased attack speed. So basically it had 2% damage reduction but 2% increased attack speed. A minor but noticeable difference when you're using axes. And now to something pretty interesting. Now can you see this, guys? There's something lagging here. Oh yes, there is. And it is the new Soul and Steel armor and physical damage reduction cluster. Basically, as you can see, it wasn't here before. We're now getting this new cluster, and the interesting about this cluster is not the increased armor skill nodes, but the Soul and Steel notable that, well, gives us a nice 30% increased armor, 4% to all elemental resistances, but the unique property here is the 4% additional physical damage reduction. So basically this works like if you were having an endurance charge permanently up, and it is a flat additional physical damage reduction, so this could actually prove pretty powerful. Now if you want to spend the skill points to get there, that's the question, but all in all a pretty interesting change, and I'm excited to see whether or not people will actually go for this skill cluster. And now the next thing you might notice is that the Bloodless cluster here has received an additional life skill node. And while that may not sound too interesting, it actually makes a pretty big difference, since you now easily have an additional 5% increased maximum life available to you if you're going down in this direction anyway. So a pretty nice change in my opinion. And now for another pretty interesting change. If we move the old skill tree in this direction, you'll see that this is an empty space. If we move the new skill tree over here, you will see there's a new skill cluster here. And basically this skill cluster provides us with skill nodes that provides increased physical damage over time and the unique melee chains to bleed. Melee attacks have 6% chance to cause bleeding. The notable itself, Bloodletting, provides 24% increased physical damage over time and 20% increased attack damage against bleeding enemies. And it's too soon for me to be able to tell how this is going to impact the game, but it's pretty interesting. Anyone running a puncture build or something that relies on bleeding would definitely benefit from picking up these skill nodes in the notable. If you guys have any suggestions or any ideas, as to how you would use this new skill wheel, let me know down in the comments. I would be very interested to hear your opinions and thoughts about this. And now most of you guys know that the acrobatics keystone has been changed. Before it provided 30% chance to dodge attacks, 50% less armor and energy shield, but the new thing in patch 1.3 is that it will give you 30% less block chance as well. A pretty big nerf to block builds. With the version 2 of the skill tree, it now reads 30% less chance to block spells and attacks, whereas it before just read 30% less block chance. So that's something to think about, 30% less chance to block spells and attacks. We'll see how that goes and how it's gonna impact the game. Alright guys, so as you can probably see, we have moved over to the Marauder starting area, and the first thing I want to show you here that has changed is the already very nice Heart of the Warrior that before had 30 flat maximum additional life and 10 plus to strength. It now has an additional 5% increased maximum life, very nice. Additionally, we're seeing that Strong Arm and Butchery now has received a 4% increased attack speed each, also a great buff. Also, if we compare the old Barbarism cluster that before had 3% increased maximum life with the skill nodes and some elemental resistances, along with 5% increased maximum life from the notable. If we compare this to the new one, we'll see that the skill nodes now has 1 additional maximum life on them for a total of 4 on each of these, and the notable has a 6% increased maximum life, which in my opinion makes this skill cluster much more efficient and makes the Barbarism notable much more appealing. It was good before, but now it's really good. And a similar change has happened to the Juggernaut cluster, where it had 5% increased maximum life before, and the skill nodes had 3% increased maximum life. With the new skill tree, we're seeing 6% increased maximum life, along with 4% increased maximum life on these 2 skill nodes. Now if we move a little to the left, we'll see that the Razor's Edge notable before had some increased physical damage and accuracy rating with swords. The new thing is that Razor's Edge with the new skill tree provides melee attacks have 5% chance to cause bleeding. And just above we're seeing that Slaughter before had 20-20-10, it now has 25-25-10. So basically a 5% increase to physical damage with axes and 5% additional increased accuracy rating with axes. Very nice. And as you can now see, we've moved closer towards the Ranger starting area and the Duelist starting area again. And the thing I want to show you here is that we have this thick skin life cluster here, where it before provided 5, 5, and 10 plus the 8% chance to avoid elemental status ailments. With the new skill tree we have 4 skill nodes, but the skill nodes themselves provide less life. They now provide 4% increased maximum life each, and the notable thick skin is left unchanged. So basically the change is that we have had 1 additional 4% life skill node here, and these have been nerfed a bit. The next thing I'm gonna mention is lethality. Before it had 16% increased physical damage with bows, 50% increased critical strike chance, and 30% increased critical strike multiplier with bows. If we take a look at the new skill tree, we can see that it has received a 5% nerf to increased critical strike multiplier, where it before had 30% increased multiplier with bows, it now has 25. Now there's not too many changes in the Templar starting area that has been changed, but I will show you 2 of them. The first one is Retribution. Before, you can see it had 4% increased attack speed along with lots of other nice bonuses. Now it has actually received a buff. It has 5% increased attack speed, so 1% extra increased attack speed. The next thing is that they changed Galvanic Hammer. The notable in itself has received 20% increased accuracy rating with maces. Before it had 15% increased accuracy rating with maces. Also the skill nodes below, the mace elemental damage nodes here, before they only provided 10% increased elemental damage with maces. Now they also provide an additional 10% increased accuracy rating with maces. So that's a nice bonus, I suppose. Now the last thing I want to show you guys that have been changed is the Witch starting nodes. And before, you can see it had 16% increased spell damage and 16% increased spell damage. Very powerful. It has been changed and nerfed a bit so that it now provides 16% increased spell damage and 12% increased spell damage. And I'm sure there's a few witches out there who's witching about this right now, but honestly guys, this was probably very fitting. If we compare the Witch starting area to the Shadow starting area that provides 14 elemental damage and 12, there's the physical damage with 15 phys and 12 increased physical damage. The Templar starting area that provides 14, 12, and we have the Marauder's physical damage that provides 16 and 12. So compared to the Witch's starting area, it's probably very fitting that the Witch has received a 4% less increased spell damage for her starting area. I still think that the Witch is going to be the most dominant class played in the new league, simply because it's so easy to transition over to the really nice Templar starting area nodes that goes really well for almost any caster build. And as a Witch, you still have the option of picking up this really nice skill node here in the beginning for the mana regeneration rate that goes so well with any Arctic armor build and Eldritch Battery build. So to conclude this video, I think we can all agree that the Duelist has received a buff, especially to his offensive capabilities. The Marauder has received a buff to his survival mechanics. There's a lot more easy accessible life for him to pick up. The Ranger and the Shadow remain fairly unchanged. The Witch has received a small nerf towards her spell damage node that we just talked about, and the Templar has received a small buff as well with his Retribution node and his Galvanic Hammer. So all in all, with the new version of the skill tree, I think the future looks a little brighter. The nerfs doesn't seem as harsh anymore, and the builds that I have tested out with the new skill tree feel so much easier to fit together, especially if you are traversing the Duelist, Marauder and Templar area of the tree. And also it seems that two-handed weapons have received a very nice buff as well, and that was definitely needed. I was theory crafting a two-handed build that worked really well before in patch 1.2, and when I was trying to make it work in this new skill tree, it was just so lackluster. The damage was inferior, and even the survivability was inferior. With the new version of this skill tree, it should be a lot easier to construct it. I'm still not sure if it's enough, but we'll have to see about that. Anyway guys, let me know what you think about the new skill tree. Do you like it? Are you excited? Would you rather just use the old 1.2 skill tree? Let me know, I would be happy to hear your opinions. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?